Now, the rest of the story.
Well, it's that time of year again. Going through and cleaning out the tanks on the 4020 cultivator. And seems how I still got to do my foliar spray, my foliar pass on my hay ground. I'm going through and putting a gallon to the acre of my side dress mix in with it because of all the extra nutrients that are in this. My agronomist is recommending that I go through and spray a little bit on. It'll encourage that second cut regrowth. And now I wouldn't pump 1,000 gallons this way, but all I did was tap into the output line on the pump, and I pretty much ran those tanks down. Problem is, it's only 30 gallons, and I needed 60 gallons in with this tank. And you can see there's some of the fertilizer. This is one of my, oh, we just ran out. This is some of the fertilizer from when I put down that liquid 32. It looks like there's a lot in there, but I'd say there was maybe 5 gallons of it in there when we were all said and done. But this is gonna run out, and to kind of complement everything I'm doing today, because we got 3/10 of an inch is what we got in the rain gauge at home, but it definitely helped the crops because everything took off. And I'd like to go down and get this stuff sprayed on, but the radiate, I don't have the radiate yet. Andrew, he has it, it's just he hasn't been in this area to drop it off. What I'm gonna end up doing is, this is a 1,000-gallon tank I brought back up from the valley. I already got a water hose hooked up. Yeah, we're done. I already got a water hose hooked up. That was just water, trust me. I'll fill this full of water and then go through, put the radiate in it, because the radiate isn't going to hurt the tank at all as far as any residuals. And I do have a bug spray I'll be putting in the sprayer and then filling it, because they don't want a bunch of bug spray directly in any of their tender tanks, because I'm borrowing this from Nutrien. And I want to go through, I'm going to flush all this out with water now, clean the inline filters, get the tanks flushed, hit this with the pressure washer, get it all cleaned up. And I want to go through and change out, I was going to go through and just change them all, but they don't need it. A bunch of these need to be switched around because a couple of them they're ground down just to nubs. That's actually a fairly new one. Well, one of these is missing, but let me get done with this here and I can move on with everything else I got to do. See if I can't do this without the camera getting sprayed. I'm filling up. This is one of the tender trailers from putting down the liquid fertilizer down at the valley. I brought it home because I had to put some goodies in it, and I ended up putting a bunch of the Y-drop mix in it. It's only going to come out to a gallon to the acre, and then I have the radiate to put in it. But then I gotta put a bug spray because the grasshoppers are starting to show up down at the valley, and I'm not gonna risk losing any tonnage to the wildlife again. So the radiate and the fertilizer mix, and yeah, that's black from the fertilizer. There's only, I don't know if there was even 10 gallons worth in the bottom of it, and it's going to dilute out to where I spray it full as a foliar. It's going to be thinned out enough. It's not going to hurt anything. And then I'm going to mix the tank and everything too. But I know guys locally do this. It's how you're able to keep water ahead of your sprayer. But I don't have to do this very often. I mean, this is once before second cut, and then almost certainly I'll at the very least be putting on the radiate and the bug spray for third cut, which the way things are looking, I'm probably going to go ahead and do the exact same program for third cut after I take second cutting off, because you guys saw per my last video, the regrowth is definitely doing something, and we're getting the rain, we're getting the heat, and everything is growing quite well. So what I end up doing here to fill this tank, I gotta get 1,000 gallons out of it. I actually bought this cattle float valve for cattle water, and I bought it last year and never got around to using it. But what's really great about it is I don't have to sit and babysit this tank, because as soon as the water gets up to here, it'll shut off. And granted, I'm not going very far away, so I'm not sure when we're gonna get down there to spray at this point in time, because they're calling for rain. Today's Tuesday. They're calling for rain tonight, Tuesday, then Wednesday, Thursday. I don't know if they're calling for anything Friday. But then we have a bunch of stuff we have to cut so we can make it, and everything's just kind of off this year. But what we are getting made is it's producing material. The cultivator really didn't get used this year. I used it across 35 acres. Typically I would have liked to go over everything, and as a result, this year I have over 100 acres that got hit with, or top dressed with urea, and then the rest of my acres are getting Y dropped. So I do have the trial that went in, and I went through, I winterized, I flushed everything out, all the fertilizer that there's 30 gallons in here, ended up in that tank, and then I pulled another 30 gallons from that tank into there, and then I flushed it with cold water, and then I put the winterizer in it, then I hit it with the pressure washer, which is what my typical yearly program for pretty much everything that has fertilizer run through it. You know, the corn planter, the sprayer, and the cultivator, you know, washed down, winterized, and everything. I was planning on, still kind of want to, go through and replace a bunch of the shovels, because that one used to look like that one, or even this one. So some of the 7-inch shovels in the back are starting to show signs of wear. For the most part, those are still good. I have a bunch of those in the parts bin, coincidentally, but the narrow ones, the long narrow ones here, I do not. And here's a good example. They're meant to be flipped over. I could flip this one, and that one, and can you see where the bolt goes? From there to there is brand new, so I can flip that around, and that's how much wear we have on that. So we are clocking a fair amount of acres. I have been clocking a fair amount of acres in on the cultivator. It's just that with this year, I can kind of quote my grandpa, got away from me. The reason that grandpa got away from cultivating is because he was trying to make hay, and he had to make hay when he should have been cultivating. I prefer row crops over the hay, but at the same time, we're proving consistently that if you take care of the hay ground, and you know, it's not just treated as a weed, it can actually perform. So it's what's convincing me to put the money into it like I am. And I don't know, I don't want to sit and rant about hay ground, at least through this video, but I'm feeling awfully optimistic. So a lot of the hoses, a lot of people ask me how I set this thing up, and I do a video about pretty much every year, it seems, talking about this. And the big thing I would change is I set all this stuff on the back end. Well, the thing is, all this shined up metal is from rubbing on all my fittings and my hose clamps. And another issue I have is when you set this down, the bar drops, the row unit comes up, and when using these cable ties like this, they're loose, but it works as like a cinching mechanism. So over time, the more you drop it down, the more it pulls this hose through, and the more it pulls that hose through, the more it yanks this down. So over here is probably the worst example, and the hose is still somewhat intact, but I mean, over time, it's got a little bit of groove in it. Over time, that's just going to be issues. I'm not shied away from wanting to cultivate. I know I had an individual offered to sell me a 12-row. In our area, I would take a lot more material, a lot more rows out with the 12-row than with this. The 6-row behind the 4020 with the liquid on the back, generally until I get the tanks run down about a quarter or so, I'm usually just tickling the ground with the front tires, so that I couldn't handle it with a 12-row with this machine. So I'm kind of more in the camp of if I'm not saying we will even, got around to getting another cultivator and running 2 6-rows with fertilizer on, I'd consider it. But we are actually going more of the course of laying our fields out so we can wide drop and be able to get things fertilized further in season. And economically, I just can't get over everything. I mean, the same thing with getting Dad and Ryan and me all running. I mean, if we had 2 cultivators running, the third one of us may actually have to run liquid for us, run the tanks for us. So the only thing outside of the row units on this thing that's starting to concern me is I think my pump is getting ready to kick it. This is what, 5 years I've ran this pump, and it is starting to come across as weak. Got to go through and check all the orifices. But what I did notice, kind of leaning more towards this route of just cutting these cable ties here, letting these hoses, hang down, and run the risk of. The problem is I run the risk on row units that I have both shovels there, is the hose can actually get back like this if it was longer, when it was longer, because they all came back clear here. I think those cable ties are actually hurting me, because I ran a couple of these rows without it, and I think it's in my best interest to really take them off. The issues I have also is when you're holding them right here, I drop the cultivator, and then these shovels are able to catch that hose, and it rips the ends of the hoses off. Trust me, I've seen it happen to all of them. So, well, that tank's filling up. I gotta get the 46 out here. It's got the sprayer on it. I'll at least get that topped off, and then I'll still be about 400 gallons short for what I need, but I'd rather get everything filled up and ready to go than decide that I can go down and spray a bunch without tearing the bottom up, or the valley up, and have to spend half a day getting all my products around.